From the Gulf States Newsroom, this is the Gulf States Gumbo, your weekly serving of stories from Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. I'm community engagement reporter Elise Gregg, chopping it up this week. April was National Poetry Month, and with the start of May comes Asian American and Pacific Islander Month. So we're taking this episode of The Gumbo to celebrate both. To do that, I'm here with Aimee Nezhukumatathil, a professor at the University of Mississippi in Oxford, Mississippi, a poet, essayist, and firefly guide for Mississippi State Parks. So Aimee, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So I have lots of other questions, but I want to start with Firefly Guide. That sounds like a very fun thing to be doing.
Sure, yeah, it's it's actually right about that time. It's just we're just waiting for the fireflies to wake up and to transform a little bit. Here in northern Mississippi, we have a population of what's called synchronous fireflies, meaning they flash at the same time as as other fireflies in their group. And usually you have to go to North Carolina, you have to go to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. But we have actually a great population of them here in North Mississippi. Their variety is called the single snappies.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Well, that is very cool. And just to start though with your book now. So you structure the book in sections, going from sunset to just before dawn. And you're writing through all the parts of the night. And I wanted to talk about, how that plays into the poems that you're presenting and how you wanted readers to experience your poetry through that time lapse.
I love that question so much about night. And for me, nighttime, it does not need to be prescriptive for everybody, but for me, as a mother of two teen boys, one is just off to college, I just remember so much that nighttime was the one time that I could kind of collect my thoughts. I always joke with my artist friends, and actually friends in general, we need time to daydream. My daydreaming happens to just happen at night, though, where I can kind of collect my thoughts where I don't have a giant to-do list, or maybe I could tackle my to-do list a lot quicker than during the day when there's always something that pushes you to the next thing, a doctor's appointment, tennis practice, piano practice, school work, things like that. Night is a slowing down of the mind, what the poet Edward Hirsch calls engaging your night mind. All the things that are important that you maybe don't get a chance to think about at night, like love, mortality, the future, these big questions. I don't know about you, but I can't think of that when I'm on the treadmill or even driving really, because I have to concentrate on the road. So for me, it's a loosening of what makes us human.
Yeah, I love that because reading it, and when I started reading it, in my mind, I feel like I kind of go to the stereotypical things we associate darkness with, the unknown or fear or things being covered up. And then as I'm reading, there's just this idea of darkness being solace, a kind of place for you to hide away, and clarity too, where I love all the points you make with all the like heavenly bodies, how we see those clearly in the dark, and you need that to see those beautiful things clearly, and family and nature are also very prominent themes, obviously, in Night Owl, and it seems like, and now hearing you say that time you take to be able to reflect on the important things, it seems like those get wrapped into this solace that you find in darkness.
Absolutely. And one of the things about poetry, maybe specifically any writing about the outdoors, is oftentimes families are not mentioned. People of color are nowhere to be found, things like that. And it's not that people aren't writing about them, but a lot of publishers do not take that on. And I've just been so pleased with all of my presses, actually, and most recently with Echo, that they're willing to take on an embracing part of the outdoors rather than a limiting one. That people who like pop music and makeup and have kids can also be people who love the outdoors. Usually it's like, oh, you have to be granola, and only alone to venture out into the mountains, things like that. And I didn't have the vocabulary for it as a kid, but kind of messes you up when you only read narratives of single people going into the forest or going on an adventure. And I just wanted this to be an embracing of all walks of life, no matter where you are.
Right. And, you mentioned here, people of color being kind of missing from this narrative too. And I know a couple of your poems touch very explicitly on your experiences of being a woman of color in America. And I'd love to talk about those in just a second. But I'm curious too how you relate that to your love of nature. Like you just said here, feeling like that was kind of missing from other art.
My father is from South India. My mother is from the Philippines. My sister and I were born in Chicago, and we were always outdoors. We always accompanied my parents to nurseries to get in the garden. I'm happy to say my husband and I just put in our garden a couple weeks ago. We got our tomato starts going so I could breathe again. That's just the world I knew, is knowing the names of plants and animals and birds and cacti and the stars. My dad was absolutely adamant that his daughters would know how to figure out constellations, even if I was a teenager and just rolling my eyes and saying like, "Okay, Dad, I get it. I don't, or I don't get it. I don't want to get it," things like that. I'm so grateful that my parents didn't give up on me. And I'm also frankly so grateful that they put some limits on what kind of TV we were allowed to watch. And now the version is screens. But as guardians and as people ourselves, we have the power to say, hey, we don't need to be attached to screens all the time. And I love social media. I love the internet for sure. But there's also a balance, and I see it in my teaching too, of how many people physically cannot be without a phone like checking a phone in 40 minutes. It's like it's so uncomfortable to them. And so what does that do when I say, "Hey, does anyone know what a robin sounds like?" A common bird, and half the class can't say it. Or does anyone know what a fire? Have you seen, when's the last time you saw a firefly? And they can only remember like maybe fourth grade because they're just not outside now. They're not outside now, or as in college or in high school, they're just simply not outside. Or if they are, they're taking selfies. They're not looking at the outside,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. I've actually only been in Mississippi for about 7 months now. I'm from South Florida originally, so very big immigrant population. Those are all my friends. I mean, my mom is Canadian, so like we all joke about having immigrant parents. And I kind of had the reverse, I think, assumptions when I went into reading Night Owl of there are going to be so many challenging themes about Mississippi specifically. And reading the poetry, I saw this warmth and just this very tender feeling of home in Mississippi that I was a little surprised by, to be honest. I had to kind of check my own biases about the South and about Mississippi in reading this. And I'm just curious, like, what it was like settling down in Mississippi and finding your home in this place that probably a lot of people like me maybe would not be the most friendly to people who are of color or are immigrants.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much for that observation. And that was, I didn't have that in mind when I was first drafting the book, but definitely I had that in mind in revising and figuring out the table of contents. And this is not to say don't get me wrong, there are tons of things wrong with the state for sure. And tons of things that are unnecessarily difficult that could be changed with laws that are more embracing of others rather than trying to not share the bounty for all, things like that. So that definitely is there. But the focus on this that I wanted to, and there's a lot of grief and sadness also in this book, but I wanted to also showcase, just as again, what does that do to people growing up and all they see of Mississippi is just terrible, terrible, terrible news or terrible, terrible renditions. I wanted to focus on the bounty here, while not shying away from injustice and rage, and climate sadness about climate change. But I also wanted to showcase like we've made a life here, we've made a home here, and it's been made welcoming by people who embrace diversity in all the best sense of the word. So rather than using a word that shouldn't be used or allowed, not allowed to use, This is what I kind of have to laugh sarcastically about it. Um, People who are afraid of diversity or think it's something to fear or worry, it's the most unnatural thing on the planet. Like all animals know that you have to work with other animals or look out for each other. Instead of this, oh, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, or look out for us, make us good or great, things like that. If you had that spirit in the animal world, you would die. Like your species would die out. So anytime I hear that, I just laugh and roll my eyes. It's literally the most unnatural way to live on the planet, to not realize that you need to help others so that or because we're all connected. And if you are making somebody's life terrible or inflicting violence or injustice upon them, you're actually doing it to yourself as well. So you don't have to take my word for it. You just got to look at the animal kingdom of which we're a part of. So I wanted to kind of showcase, look at all the good that is here, not just in Mississippi, but in the South and on the planet, and that it is not too late. It is never too late to say, hey, I'm kind of tired of this hate. I'm tired of being small-minded, and I just want to at least be open. As they say here in the South, you catch more flies with honey, and I believe that. Nobody wants to hear a lecture. But my hope is that these poems remind you of what could be, all the beauty and the joy of what could be in our communities.
Yeah. If there's anything else that you would want listeners to know or to take away from your book, I'd love to make some space for that.
I think a final thing I would say about this book is that it is a slowing down. It is a taking the time. I say to my students, but I say this to my friends as well, like, especially in this big news cycle time when there's some sort of breaking news all the time and some disaster, most of it is negative, that we need time to daydream. Whether or not you are a creator or someone who doesn't feel like they have a creative bone in their body, humans need time to daydream. That's one of the things that separates us a little bit from others, is that we need time to contemplate our hopes, wishes, dreams, fears, and that in this slowing down, this noticing what's around us, noticing, oh, that's a indigo bunting, that kind of thing that's outside, as opposed to just that's a random bird. Or oh, that's the mockingbird, the Mississippi state bird, instead of just I hear something, that kind of thing. My hope is that you realize that noticing, that slowing down, that noticing is actually an act of love.
Aimee, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I was very privileged to read your book, so thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so glad. And at least I could tell you did your homework. You really dug into this.
That was Aimee Nezhukumatathil, professor at Ole Miss, poet, essayist, and firefly guide for Mississippi State Parks, talking about her latest collection of poetry, Night Owl. This week's show is cooked up by the Gulf States Newsroom team. Our theme music is by DJ Supreme. Special thanks to our partner stations WBHM, Mississippi Public Broadcasting, WWNO, and WRKF. Our theme music is by DJ Supreme. Special thanks to our partner stations WBHM, Mississippi Public Broadcasting, WWNO, and WRKF. You can find us in your podcast feeds every Friday. Look us up and be sure to subscribe. Again, I'm your host, Elise Gregg. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to stir your root.